Mom took her daughter to a job interview. A lonely millionaire got a hug, and everything changed. Before we begin this story, drop a comment and let me know, which country are you watching from? The revolving glass doors of Harrison Enterprises whooshed open as Ella Matthews stepped into the marble-floored lobby. Clutching her worn leather portfolio with one hand and her daughter Emma's small fingers, with the other her heart pounded like a drum in her chest, echoing louder than the polished heels clicking all around her as powerful strangers moved with purpose. While she hesitated near the reception desk trying to mask the trembling in her knees, behind a forced smile, Emma tilted her head up, her blonde curls bouncing. As she whispered, "Mommy, why are you squeezing my hand so tight?" Ella looked down quickly, loosening her grip and forcing calm into her voice. "Sorry, sweetie, Mommy's just a little nervous. This interview is really important for us," Emma nodded. With the serene confidence only a 7-year-old could carry, "You'll get the job. You're the best artist in the world, and if they don't see that, they're just silly." Ella managed a small laugh even as her stomach twisted. The babysitter had canceled last minute, and she had no other option but to bring Emma along, praying silently that the company would understand, or at the very least not hold it against her. The receptionist gave them a cool glance before announcing, "Mr. Harrison, we'll see you now." Her breath hitched. "Mr. Harrison," she asked, "isn't this an interview with Human Resources? Change of plans?" The receptionist replied, "Mr. Harrison prefers to personally evaluate all candidates for creative roles now, if you'll follow me." The woman's heels clicked sharply down the corridor as Ella and Emma followed, each step echoing with dread. Robert Harrison was a name she knew well, a titan of industry, a legend in business magazines, and a man feared for his ruthless precision and emotional detachment. She'd read the rumors. He fired people over minor infractions, refused handshakes, and kept his office colder than a walk-in freezer. Now she was walking toward that very room, her dream job dangling precariously between her nerves and her daughter's unpredictable presence. When they reached the office door, Emma looked up at her solemnly. "I'll be quiet, I promise, Mommy." Ella bent down and kissed her forehead. "Good girl, just sit here and play with your game quietly, okay? Don't come in unless there's a fire." Emma nodded solemnly, her small frame dwarfed by the plush waiting bench. The receptionist opened the tall door, and Ella stepped inside. The office was vast, with floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over Boston's skyline. Sunlight poured in behind a tall, silver-haired man whose back was turned as he stood staring out over the city. "Mr. Harrison," she began tentatively, "I'm Ella Matthews. Thank you for the opportunity." "You're late," he interrupted without turning, his voice crisp and unimpressed. "I despise tardiness." The words cut through the air like a blade. "I apologize," she said quickly. "The security downstairs took a little longer than expected." "Excuses don't interest me, Mrs. Matthews," he said, turning now to face her. And for a moment she faltered, something in his eyes, not the cold steel she expected, but something reddened, something raw. Had he been crying? "Show me why I should hire you," he demanded, skipping any greeting, his gaze scanning her portfolio without emotion. "Dozens of applicants before you have disappointed me." Ella swallowed hard and opened her portfolio, hands trembling slightly as she launched into her presentation, her voice shaky, her confidence unraveling. She was barely into her second slide, explaining her visual storytelling philosophy, when the door burst open and Emma's voice chirped out brightly, "Mommy, my game stopped working." The silence that followed was deafening. Ella froze, mortified, her eyes darting between her daughter and the man whose time she had just wasted. Robert Harrison stood still, his eyes fixed on the child in the doorway. Then slowly he looked back at Ella and raised one hand as she began to stammer out an apology. "Wait," he said softly, not to her but to himself. His voice had lost its sharpness, and when Emma took a step closer, peering up at him curiously, she asked plainly, "Are you sad, Mr.?" Her voice held no judgment, only concern. Ella stepped forward, trying to reach her, but he held up a hand again, stopping her. "Yes," he said simply, and for the first time his voice trembled a little. "I suppose I am sad." Emma tilted her head thoughtfully. "My teacher says when someone's sad, they need a hug to make the sad smaller." And without hesitation she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around his legs in a tight hug. Ella wanted to cry or scream or disappear. She was certain this was the end of the interview, and any Chance she had at rebuilding her life, but instead of stepping back or pushing Emma away, Robert Harrison slowly knelt down to her level, his expression unreadable but softer than before. "What's your name?" he asked gently. "Emma Matthews. I'm 7. And that's my mommy. She makes the prettiest pictures in the world," she added proudly, pointing at the now-forgotten portfolio in Elalanena's trembling hands. Robert stood slowly, clearing his throat. As he adjusted his tie, his eyes lingered on Emma before turning back to Elalanena. "Mrs. Matthews, I've seen enough." She blinked in disbelief, her heart racing faster than ever. "But my portfolio, that won't be necessary," he interrupted again, his lips twitching into what might have been a smile. "Your daughter has a remarkable talent for assessment. You start Monday. My assistant will handle the paperwork." Unable to form words, Elalanena simply nodded and followed. As he walked them out of the office, when she glanced back one last time through the glass wall, she saw him standing still, one hand touching his chest right where Emma's little arms had held him just moments earlier outside in the lobby. Emma skipped alongside her. "I told you you'd get it, Mommy," she said matter-of-factly. And for once Elalanena let herself believe, maybe, just maybe, her daughter was right. The following week passed like a dream Elalanena couldn't quite believe was real. Every morning, she dressed carefully in the clothes she once saved for freelance pitches. Every night, she checked on Emma twice just to make sure this wasn't some fragile fantasy about to vanish. Harrison Enterprises was everything she expected, and more sleek, efficient, intimidating, and yet something about the atmosphere had begun to shift ever so slightly since her hiring people watched her with curiosity. Whispers followed her through the design department, and her name seemed to carry a strange weight she didn't understand. Melissa, the head of design, pulled her aside on her third day and asked with wide eyes what exactly happened in that interview, because Harrison never interviews anyone himself, and he never hires on the spot, let alone with a child in the room. Elalanena offered a half-truth about making an impression, but the truth was she didn't understand it herself until Friday morning, when a company-wide email arrived announcing, "Take your child to work day," and a specific note was addressed to Elalanena Matthews. "Your daughter Emma is welcome in the office. We look forward to seeing her." The message, signed with 3 simple initials, RHS. By mid-morning, Emma was seated at a tiny desk set up beside her mother's workspace, surrounded by colored pencils and glitter glue, completely absorbed in a drawing, while the entire design team pretended not to be enchanted by her occasional commentary or her unsolicited advice on color choices. Melissa brought her cookies from the break room, the printer guy gave her a paper tiara, and someone even let her name a new logo concept. By noon, the floor was buzzing with more laughter than usual, but the mood changed instantly when the elevator chimed and someone whispered, "He's coming down the design floor." Never saw the CEO in person, not even during quarterly reviews, and yet there he was, Robert Harrison, immaculate in his dark suit, stepping through the glass doors, his sharp eyes scanning the room and landing on Emma, who gasped with delight and cried out, "Mr. Sadman, you came back again." Before anyone could react, Emma ran across the floor and grabbed his hand with the confidence of someone who didn't know what fear meant. "I made you something," she said, and tugged him toward Elalanena's desk. To everyone's astonishment, Robert allowed himself to be led like a guest of honor as Emma picked up a large sheet of construction paper and held it up proudly. It was a crayon drawing of the Harrison Enterprises building, with 3 stick figures standing outside, one tall figure with silver hair, and 2 smaller ones, one with curls and a pink dress, the other with dark hair in a bun. "That's you," Emma explained. "That's me. And Mommy, we're holding hands, see? And you're smiling." Robert took the picture in both hands, staring at it with an intensity that rivaled how he usually looked at profit margins. "Excellent use of perspective," he said gravely. "What's perspective?" Emma asked, curiosity shining in her eyes. "It means how we see things from different places," Robert replied, kneeling beside her chair. "May I keep this for my office?" Emma beamed. "Of course, I can make you more if you want." "I'd like that very much," Robert said, standing again and turning to Elalanena, who had been frozen with equal parts awe and horror at the surreal exchange. "Mrs. Matthews, I'd like to speak with you in my office at 4. Bring Emma to." Her heart raced again as whispers erupted across the department. After he left, Melissa turned slowly and asked, "What sort of sorcery is this? I've worked here 8 years and he doesn't even know I exist." Ella Nena had no answer, only a quiet sense of rising confusion. And something else beneath it all, a flicker of fear. Because what if his attention wasn't about her at all, at for sharp? They entered Robert's office, where Emma's drawing now hung in a sleek black frame on the wall behind his desk. My picture, Emma gasped. It looks fancy. Now important art deserves a proper display, Robert said with a rare softness in his tone. Ella Nena noticed the photograph she had glimpsed during her interview was now visible to a younger Robert beside a radiant dark-haired woman whose hand rested on a round pregnant belly. Mrs. Matthews, Robert said, gesturing to the chairs. I have a proposition for you both. A proposition? Ella Nena asked automatically, her hand tightening on Emma's shoulder. Yes, Robert continued. This year's Harrison Foundation Gala will focus on second chances, a theme that your daughter has unintentionally helped me understand, and I'd like her help in designing the visual materials, invitations, banners, programs, with your assistance, of course. Ella Nena blinked, unsure if she'd heard correctly. But she's 7 precisely, Robert replied. She sees the world with clarity most adults lost long ago. His eyes drifted to the framed photograph, and for a moment he looked far away again, like a man standing on the edge of something deep. After a moment of silence, he pressed a button on his desk intercom. Jana, send in the package, please. His assistant entered with a beautifully wrapped box, which Robert placed before Emma. Go ahead, open it. Inside was a polished wooden case of professional-grade colored pencils, engraved with Emma's name in silver. Emma gasped, and without hesitation wrapped her arms around Robert's neck in another spontaneous hug. This time, he did not hesitate. He returned the embrace, closing his eyes for a moment, as though anchoring himself in it. When she returned to her seat, already unpacking her new treasure, Robert looked at Ella Nena, his voice quiet but certain. Your daughter may have reminded me of something I didn't know I was missing. We'll finalize the project details tomorrow, but for now, thank you for letting her walk into my life that day. She didn't mean to. Ella Nena said honestly. Robert nodded. Sometimes the best things arrive by accident. He stood and walked them to the elevator. As the doors slid open, Emma turned back. Who's the pretty lady in the photo? She asked. Robert's smile faded just slightly. My wife Elizabeth, he said. She's in heaven now with our son. Emma blinked, but said nothing. The doors closed, leaving Robert standing alone once again, this time with something real in his hands and something even stronger slowly stitching itself back together in his heart. The following Saturday arrived with the hush of fog rolling over the Boston harbor, and a quiet knock on the door of Ella Nena's modest apartment signaling the arrival of a black car. Robert had sent for them. Emma twirled in a yellow sundress, her curls bouncing like sunlight trapped in motion, as she asked excitedly, do I look pretty, Mommy? You look like sunshine, Ella Nena replied, adjusting her daughter's cardigan, while her own stomach danced with nerves. They were headed to Robert's private Beacon Hill residence, a place whispered about in business circles, but never seen by most. The car glided through iron gates and up a winding drive toward a mansion that looked like it belonged in a historical painting, ivy climbing its brick exterior, windows like eyes watching a world that never quite touched it. When they arrived, Robert himself opened the grand double doors, his tie slightly loosened, as though trying to meet them halfway between boardroom and homecoming. He said, and though his voice was steady, his eyes flickered with something more vulnerable than usual. Emma skipped ahead, marveling at the chandeliers and ancient portraits as Ella Nena followed, clutching her bag and wondering again what strange current had pulled her into this world. They made their way into a warm, sunlit library, where art supplies had been arranged on a long oak table. Emma gasped with joy and immediately ran to inspect the colors, while Robert gestured for Ella Nena to sit with him near the fireplace. She's remarkable, he said, watching Emma's small fingers explore paint tubes with reverence. Her latest concept for the gala focuses on broken things being fixed by little hands. She always draws stories, Ella Nena said quietly, even before she could write words. Robert looked at her carefully. You've raised her alone? Yes, Ella Nena nodded, her smile faltering. Her father left when I was 7 months pregnant, said he wasn't ready for fatherhood, and I haven't heard from him since. Robert's jaw tensed slightly. Some men don't deserve the gift they're given. His words hung in the air like smoke for a moment before Emma's voice rang out. Mer Harrison, can I see the rest of your castle? Ella Nena laughed nervously, but Robert stood. I suppose a tour is in order. Follow me. They walked through echoing hallways past rooms filled with books and antiques. But it wasn't until they reached the end of a narrow corridor that Robert paused, his hand resting on a doorknob he hadn't touched in decades. He hesitated, then pushed it open, revealing a nursery frozen in time. The air smelled faintly of lavender and old wood, the walls painted soft blue, with sailing ships drifting across them. A crib carved with stars stood untouched, and on a rocking chair sat a teddy bear with a stitched captain's hat. Emma moved forward. Before anyone could stop her, her eyes wide as she picked up the bear. "He looks lonely," she said simply, hugging it against her chest. "His name is Captain," Robert whispered as though speaking it aloud. "Might break something invisible. Captain needs a friend," Emma declared, hugging the bear tighter, as if willing the past to let go. Elena watched Robert's face shift, something deep and long buried unraveling before her eyes. The grief that had etched itself into the lines of his face seemed to rise and crack like thawing ice. "Robert," she said gently, stepping closer. "We don't have to stay here." He nodded stiffly, his throat tight. But before they turned to leave, Emma placed Captain back in the chair and leaned in close, whispering something only the bear could hear. "What did you say, sweetheart?" Elena asked later in the car. Emma yawned and said, "I told him someone would come play with him soon. He's been waiting a really long time." That night, as Emma slept with her new sketchpad on the nightstand and Captain resting beside her pillow, a message arrived on Elena's phone. "Thank you for today. For 30 years I couldn't enter that room." She stared at the screen, unsure what to feel, because she wasn't just seeing a shift in Robert Harrison, she was feeling one in herself too. And it scared her more than she cared to admit, because the lines between employer and protector, between grieving man and someone who made her heart ache, were blurring fast, and she didn't know if she was ready to let them blur all the way. The night of the Harrison Foundation Gala arrived, wrapped in silk and spotlight, as the city buzzed with anticipation, and Elena stood frozen in her tiny kitchen, holding a crumpled note from her babysitter who had canceled with only 2 hours to spare. Panic surged in her chest, but when she called Robert to explain, he didn't hesitate for a second. "Bring her," he said simply. "She's as much responsible for this night as anyone." So now Emma sat in the back seat of a black town car, her new blue dress, a gift from Robert, shimmering beneath the interior lights, while Elena adjusted the hem of her elegant gown, which had also arrived mysteriously that morning, fitted perfectly, as if tailored to her unspoken dreams. The gala venue was breathtaking. The grand ballroom of the Harrison Hotel transformed into a palace of light and glass, with Emma's art woven through every detail. Paper lanterns bore her sketches, banners unfurled with her handwriting, and the donor wall shimmered with her crayon renderings recast in silver and silk. They drew stares as they entered. Robert, waiting near the stage, greeted them with a warmth that startled Elena, his hand resting gently on her lower back as if it had always belonged there. "Let them stare," he whispered. "Tonight isn't about them. Tonight is about second chances." As the music faded and champagne flutes clinked, Robert took the stage. His presence commanding, the crowd fell silent, not because he asked, but because they couldn't look away. 30 years ago, the Harrison Foundation began as a promise to a woman I loved. He began, his voice steady and clear. "But for years we gave from a distance. We wrote checks. We offered numbers, not names. That ends tonight." He glanced toward Emma, who stood clutching her mother's hand in the wings. 3 weeks ago, I met someone who changed my life, a little girl who hugged me without hesitation and reminded me what it means to feel. Tonight's theme, second chances, is her gift to all of us. Her name is Emma Matthews, and she sees the world in a way I thought I'd forgotten. The room erupted in applause, but Elena barely heard it over the thunder in her chest. Moments later, as Emma blushed and waved shyly at donors congratulating her and praising her art, Elena found herself alone with Robert on the balcony overlooking the city. She turned to him, her voice low. "You shouldn't have put us in the spotlight, Robert. We're your employees, not your family. Is that all you are?" he asked, his voice quiet but intense. "Because in 3 weeks, you've brought more life into my world than I've known in decades." She tried to protest, but he stepped closer. "Surely you felt it too." Before she could answer, a commotion erupted inside, someone calling for help, and Elena's heart stopped when she saw Emma lying pale and motionless on the marble floor, her small frame surrounded by guests. Robert was already moving, scooping her into his arms with a speed and care that left no room for questions. "Call an ambulance," he barked, But la nena shouted, Boston Children's, they know her case. My car's faster, Robert cut in, cradling Emma like something sacred. Unbreakable as they raced through the night, the silence in the back seat was broken only by Emma stirring weakly. I'm sorry I ruined your party, she whispered. You didn't ruin anything, sweetheart, la nena whispered, brushing her curls aside. Robert's eyes met hers in the mirror, and his voice cracked. I'm calling Dr. Winters, best pediatric cardiologist in the country. He owes me a favor. We can't afford this, she said, tears welling. Not like that, this isn't about money, Robert said gently, but firmly. Please, la nena, let me help her. When they arrived at their doctors, rushed Emma away, and la nena crumbled into a chair, her gown stained with tears and worry, her mind spinning. The diagnosis came quickly. An atrial septal defect, a larger hole in Emma's heart than previous scans had shown. Surgery was necessary, and soon Robert never left her side, not when she paced the halls, or when she sobbed in silence, or when she couldn't find the strength to speak. When she finally turned to him and asked why he was still here, his answer was simple: because when Emma hugged me that day, she gave me something I hadn't felt in 30 years. Hope. Later, as they stood beside Emma's hospital bed, monitors beeping rhythmically and oxygen hissing gently, Robert knelt and took her hand. Emma, you're the bravest person I know, and I promise I'll be right here, no matter what. She looked up at him with wide eyes. Can you take care of mommy too? While I'm getting fixed, she forgets to eat lunch sometimes. Robert's lips trembled, but he nodded. I'll take care of both of you, sunshine. And as she drifted to sleep, under the weight of sedatives and love, la nena realized with breathless clarity that somewhere between a hug in a glass tower and a hospital in the night, they had stopped being strangers and started becoming something that looked and felt a lot like a family. The ocean air was thick with salt and silence as the black SUV pulled up the winding road that led to the Cape Cod house, nestled between dunes and swaying sea grass, where waves crashed softly just beyond the hill. And Emma's sleepy voice whispered from the back seat, is this a fairy tale, mommy? Because it feels like one. La nena didn't answer right away, her eyes taking in the shingled home that curved into the coastline like it had always belonged there, flanked by a smaller guest cottage with its own stone path and porch, as if waiting patiently for them. Robert met them at the front steps, his sleeves rolled up and hair tousled by the breeze, a smile creasing his face, not the practiced kind worn by CEOs at board meetings, but the kind that came from somewhere quiet and real inside. I've been waiting, he said simply, holding the door open and leading them into warmth. The main house was elegant, but lived in, no longer sterile like his Boston penthouse, but softened by books and blankets and the faint scent of lemonwood polish. The guest cottage was perfect, to bedrooms, wide windows, and a deck that opened directly to the sea. And when Emma saw the surprise inside the sunroom, she gasped so loudly the gulls took flight. A fully stocked art studio waited just for her: easels, paints, sketchpads, and watercolors arranged at her height with a note that read, sunshine, this is where you grow better. Robert, the first night passed slowly, with Emma still healing and needing rest, and la nena watching her chest rise and fall until dawn. Then one morning, 2 weeks later, she found Robert on the main deck, staring out at the Atlantic, his hands wrapped around a mug of coffee and his shoulders loose in a way that made him look a decade younger. Thank you, she said softly, joining him at the railing. For this place, for all of it. I wasn't sure about coming, but it was the right decision. He looked at her carefully, not just for Emma. She hesitated, unsure of how to name what was slowly building between them, something that made her stomach flutter and her guard rise at the same time. And you, she asked eventually, do you ever feel like this is real? Robert nodded slowly. I do, more than anything, and that terrifies me. La nena laughed quietly, the sound startling her because it had been so long since she'd laughed without fear of breaking something. Later that evening, after Emma had fallen asleep, surrounded by drawings and sunshine-colored blankets, Robert invited her to dinner in the main house, and she found him in the kitchen battling a corkscrew. Like it was a puzzle from another world, she stepped in without thinking. Let me, and opened the bottle with practiced ease, her fingers steady for once, while he watched her with something like, I used to cook a lot, she said, setting the pasta to boil. It made me feel in control when everything else was chaos. I'm the opposite, Robert admitted. I ate power lunches for 30 years and never touched a pan. They sat on the porch under string lights, eating pasta with too much garlic and sharing stories about things that had nothing to do with corporate strategy or court filings. She told him about art school and the tiny apartment where she first brought Emma home. He told her about college summers spent sailing with Elizabeth, and the moment he first held the deed to his company and realized it meant nothing without someone to share it with. After dinner, they walked along the shoreline, the sand cool under their feet, the moon a perfect silver coin above them, and when she asked softly, "Why are you doing all this? Really don't say it's because she hugged you." He stopped walking and looked at her like he was seeing her for the first time. "I'm doing this because for the first time in 30 years, I want to be seen not as a symbol or a name or a figure on a screen, but as someone who still has something to give, and maybe someone to give it to." She felt the pull between them like gravity or tide, ancient and impossible to resist, but she stepped back. "I can't be your second chance," she said. "Not yet." "I'm not asking you to be," he replied. "I'm just asking you to stay." And as they walked back in silence, their hands close but not touching, Nena realized she wanted to stay more than she wanted to be afraid. And maybe that was the beginning of everything. It started with the sound of waves crashing gently against the shore, and the clink of coffee mugs on the deck, as Emma painted seagulls with colors too bright for realism, but just right for her imagination, and Nena folded laundry in the sun, not knowing that in the shadows beyond the tall dune grass, a lens had captured the moment. A photo of a mother, a child, and a man who looked nothing like a CEO, and everything like family. 2 weeks later, as routine had become comfort and fear had begun to sleep deeply, Robert's security chief Davis arrived unannounced on the porch, his expression darker than the clouds rolling in from the sea. He handed Robert a folder of surveillance photos, long lens shots of Emma laughing, of Nena reading on the porch, of Robert holding an umbrella over them both during a brief Cape drizzle. "Someone's been watching us," Robert said quietly, and when he flipped to the last page and read the name James Mercer, Nena went still, her knees threatening to fold. She whispered, "I know that name," and Robert looked at her sharply. "You recognize him?" She nodded slowly, her voice trembling. "James Mercer is Emma's grandfather. My ex Andrew's father, the one who paid me to disappear." Robert's mouth pressed into a hard line. "You told me Andrew abandoned you." "He did," she said. "But what I didn't tell you was that when I refused to name Emma after their family, they offered me money to go away and never contact them again. I was pregnant, broken, scared, and they wanted no association with a child born out of wedlock. They made it clear we weren't welcome, and I didn't want to raise Emma in a world that treated her like a stain. So I took the settlement and never looked back. And now they're watching us." Robert said, his tone flat with fury. Later that afternoon, Emma's tutor came to the guest house looking pale. "There's a couple at the gate," she said, "an older man and woman. They say their name is Mercer, and they're here to see their granddaughter." Nena froze, her heart hammering, and whispered, "They found us." Robert stood instantly and told the tutor to take Emma to the art studio and stay with her until further notice, as he escorted Nena to the main house where James and Vivian Mercer waited, dressed in crisp summer linen, like they were attending a brunch instead of ambushing a child they'd never wanted. "This is highly irregular," James said stiffly when Robert entered with Nena. "This was meant to be a private conversation. Matthews has asked me to be present," Robert replied coolly, "and this is my home." Vivian looked at Nena with the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes. "We've come to reconnect with Emma after Andrew's passing. Our perspective has changed." "How convenient," Nena replied, her voice sharper than she intended. "And it has nothing to do with seeing photos of us in the society section of the Globe." The Mercers didn't flinch. Instead, they slid legal documents across the table. "We'd like to establish a trust for Emma's future education, and in return we'd like regular visitation rights, and for her last name to be changed to Mercer." Nena stared at them in disbelief. "You rejected her for 7 years, and now you wanted to brand her like a trophy." James folded his hands neatly. "Andrew was our only child. Emma is all we have left of him." Robert's voice cut through the tension, cold and sharp. "So you want to use her as your legacy piece now that your son is gone?" Vivian's composure cracked for a moment. "This is about family, Robert, not manipulation. You lost yours, surely you understand." But Robert stood slowly. "You're right, I do understand loss, and that's exactly why I won't let you hurt this little girl who finally has peace and love. After a lifetime of being ignored, you can file your petition and try to twist the court's sympathy. But make no mistake, I will not let you near her unless she asks for. You herself." Elalonena reached for his hand under the table and squeezed it once, trembling. But grateful, the Mercers rose from their seats, masks of politeness still fixed to their faces. James said coolly, "We'll let our attorneys do the rest," and walked out with their designer shoes clicking against the stone floor the moment the door closed. Robert turned to Elalonena, his voice raw. "We'll fight this. I have the best legal team in the state." She looked at him, her eyes glistening, and asked softly, "Why are you doing this really?" "Because I love her," Robert said without hesitation. "And I think I might be starting to love you too." And just like that, the wall between them cracked wide open. Not because it was forced, but because it had been quietly softening since the day a little girl with a broken tablet gave a broken man a hug and reminded him what it meant to belong. The morning sun painted the sky in streaks of gold and rose as Elalonena stood at the kitchen sink of the guest cottage, staring out at the calm sea, with a cup of untouched coffee growing cold in her hands while Emma hummed softly in the background, sketching waves and birds, and Robert paced the study of the main house reading the documents. The Mercers had filed for grandparental visitation, their request bolstered by media coverage of the gala photos and embellished rumors of an improper relationship between a billionaire and his employee. The lines of attack were cruel and strategic, claiming financial manipulation, undue influence, and a lack of moral fitness. Robert's phone buzzed, and when he answered, the voice on the other end sent an icy chill down his spine. Mercer had secured a private meeting with Harrison Enterprises board of directors, planning to reveal 30-year-old financial records from the founding of the company. Robert said nothing, just tightened his jaw and hung up, turning to Davis. "Prepare the jet. I need to be in Boston tonight." When he told Elalonena, her first instinct was to pack Emma's bag and follow him. But he stopped her gently. "Emma needs to stay here. She needs stability right now. And you need rest. This battle isn't yours to fight, not yet." And when he kissed her forehead and promised to return by morning, she saw something behind his eyes she hadn't seen before, fear, real and raw and trembling. The next morning, Elalonena was in the middle of making toast when her phone screen lit up with a breaking news alert. Harrison Enterprises board calls emergency meeting amid allegations of financial impropriety. Her heart stopped. The toast burned. The knife dropped into the sink. She called Robert. No answer. She called again. Voicemail. She dressed Emma without speaking, told Davis to drive them both into Boston. And when they arrived at the towering glass headquarters, chaos was already spilling into the streets. Reporters shouting, employees whispering, security blocking access. Genre, Robert's assistant, saw them and rushed forward. "Thank God you're here," she said breathlessly. "He's in the boardroom, and he won't say it, but he needs you." When the elevator doors opened and Robert stepped out, his shoulders squared and his jaw tight, he faltered the moment he saw Emma, his armor cracking for just a heartbeat. "You shouldn't be here," he said hoarsely. And Elalonena stepped forward. "Anyway, yes, we should, because we're part of this too." "Emma, Robert," Emma called, running to him. "Are the mean people trying to take me away from you?" He knelt and held her tightly. "Some problems can't be fixed with hugs, sunshine," he whispered. "Even yours." Emma pulled back and said softly, "All problems get smaller with hugs," and wrapped her arms around his neck. And in that instant, Robert looked up at Elalonena with eyes full of something no scandal could destroy, something no boardroom could define. And when they walked into the emergency boardroom together, Robert standing tall, Emma holding his hand, and Elalonena by his side, he faced the gathered directors and admitted to the truth. 30 years ago, he had made one unethical decision to save a collapsing deal, but 6 months later he had repaid every dollar with interest, with documentation to prove it. The board listened in silence until one senior director spoke. "Your decades of leadership outweigh one early misstep. Harrison, you have our confidence." Mercer miscalculated after the meeting as Robert held the door open for Elalonena. "She didn't step through right away. You should have told me," she said quietly. "I was scared." He admitted, not of losing the company, but of losing what we have. She took his hand. "Then you haven't lost us." "Not yet, not if you're ready for honesty." "Always," Robert said. But they barely made it back to his office before Davis came sprinting through the hallway. "Sir, we have a situation. Your assistant received a call this morning. Someone pretending to be you redirected her and Emma to meet her grandparents for lunch. But the assistant got suspicious and called me. We've locked the building down. They're here with Emma right now." Robert moved like a storm down The elevator. Emma stood in the main lobby between James and Vivian Mercer, confused, but unharmed. Mommy, she called out as soon as she saw Ella and Nena running to her. I thought you were meeting us for lunch. They said it was a surprise. That was a lie. Sweetheart, Ella and Nena said, holding her daughter so tight she could barely breathe. Robert stepped forward, his voice calm and cold. You had no right to come near her. James Mercer tried to speak. We merely wanted time with our granddaughter, but Robert cut him off. You attempted to remove a child from this building under false pretenses. That's not visitation, that's abduction. You're lucky I'm not calling the police. Vivian's facade cracked completely. You don't understand, she's all we have left of Andrew. She's our legacy. And Robert's voice turned quiet, then deadly. Then you should have loved her from the beginning, not just when it suited your name and fortune. And before the Mercers could protest, he turned to Ella and Nena, his hand reaching into his coat. I didn't plan to do this today, but maybe it's exactly the right time. And he dropped to one knee, holding open a velvet box with a green emerald that shimmered like the sea behind their cottage. I lost everything. Once, and for 30 years, I thought I deserved that loss. But then your daughter hugged me, and you walked into my life, and I realized maybe redemption is real, maybe love can be chosen. If you let it all, Nena Matthews, will you marry me and let me be Emma's father in every way that matters? The world went still. Emma squealed and wrapped her arms around both of them, and Ella Nena dropped to her knees and whispered yes. And for the first time in years, Robert Harrison wept, not for grief or regret, but for the overwhelming relief of being seen, of being chosen. And as security escorted the Mercers from the building, defeated and small and powerless against the love they had tried to buy and bend, Emma whispered into Robert's ear, I already practiced saying it, I love you, Daddy. And in that moment, the hug that started everything became the promise that nothing would ever be the same again. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel.